Hello there, and welcome to Recon Paint Gaming. I'm Patrick. Today we're going to be painting a Nashorn with a camo scheme. I'm using a World of Tanks paint color UK tank. I understand this is a German tank, but I rarely get to use this color green, so I thought it'd be a great base coat. I'm painting the entire tank with a brush because a player saw another paint job that I did and was curious on how I did it. So I know that person and also others don't have access to airbrushes, so I'm doing the entire thing with the brush to show you how it can be done. I did also show my wet palette at the beginning. I can't recommend wet palettes enough, so if your local gaming store has one or if you can order one online, almost any of them will do. It allows your paint to stay wet as you paint, because I know a lot of new painters will just glob it onto a surface. They'll start painting, and as they paint, their paint is actually drying on the palette, which can then affect the model in the long run. It's going to start globbing rather than, a nice even coat, and it's just not going to work out well. So you really should be using a wet palette if you're using strictly brush. I do recommend it even if you have an airbrush, because eventually you will probably go to a brush for those finer details. So what I'm using is a artistic brush, 1.0. It's a standard round brush that I would recommend for this type of job. I would not recommend a flat brush. To each their own. You can use one if you'd like, but I wouldn't use a flat brush unless it's for something larger. For something this size, I'd use the 1.0. For small models, you really want to stick with the round tip because it's going to paint on better. All right, now that we've got a lot of the paint down, when you paint your tank with the base coat, you again want to keep the paint wet. You want to, of course, do nice even strokes. You don't want to try to glob the paint on, because I know a lot of new painters will try to glob the paint on rather than actually painting it, because they want to get it done fast. They want to make it a quick job. You'll take as much of the paint on the brush as possible and put it on there. It's not going to do what you think it will do. You're thinking, if I glob it on, it's going to coat the tank faster. It's not. It's just going to make it look uneven, and you're going to lose a lot of the detail, like the lines and the curves and the dents. So I've painted a lot of the outside details, the gun barrel, the top side. I'm avoiding the tracks. I'm avoiding the wheels, really, because those usually don't get painted the same color as the tank itself. Usually, because it's tracks, they're going to stay their normal color. And most of the time, tanks get painted with all these extra pieces off the tank, and then as they roll out, parts get added, and then they come off the assembly floor. Same thing with the tracks on the front. But when you're doing camo painting, a lot of the times the camo gets added after everything has been put on. So you'll notice I'm going to be painting certain things that you normally would not paint on a tank. And it's dealer's choice, really, because different tank drivers or commanders have different ways that they want to add camo with experience, or, basically time, or sometimes the tank gets shipped out to a different area and it's got to get a paint scheme done really quickly, so they only have what they can get. Maybe they commandeered some paint from another area, and so that's why this one's painted green. So it's always nice to also have backstories for your tanks as well. I like to have them for mine anyways, because World War II, of course, was crazy. You took what you can get. Sometimes you commandeered other people's or other countries' vehicles and you recommissioned them to yours, and you started throwing your logos and emblems on it so that people could notice your tank. You didn't, have friendly fire. I know that didn't work all the time. Sometimes a Comet would get shot by a German tank force or artillery because they didn't realize it wasn't a non-German tank. But here I am painting the undercoat. This is also an odd topic. Some people don't paint underneath their tank. That is, again, dealer's choice. You can do whatever you'd like with it, but I like to. I'm also going to start painting the names of the tanks on the bottom, because a lot of these do look similar, and it's sometimes hard to tell when they're all near each other, especially when you have like an archer next to a Achilles, like you can tell, but sometimes you can't, and a Nashorn next to its counterpart as well. So they start to look similar. There's just slight differences in gun barrel sizes or the shape. So it's always good for me myself. So that's the entire tank base coat painted. I'm now going to create a yellow myself. So this is a yellow ochre airbrush paint, and then I'm adding a dry brush World of Tanks paint to try and thicken it up and also to lighten the yellow, because I don't want it a bright yellow. I kind of want it a dull yellow. So when you're painting the camo schemes, I know a lot of people like to make thin lines, and they also like to limit how they do it. I mean, if you read up on history books, when you see these things, sometimes they did get a camo scheme on the factory floor, so the paints kind of like blended together, or it was more faded when colors would switch. Other times they were given just a paintbrush and a bucket and said, here, go paint it. And other times they were given mops because they were, that's the paintbrush for that size. So, I mean, if my paintbrush is equal to the size of this tank to a normal size tank, a mop would be the equivalent of an actual brush. So I like using a thicker brush like this because it makes the camo more realistic for when you're painting it. The next thing when painting camo is different but similar. So you'll notice I'm not making shapes that are the same, but they're not exactly different either. You've got nice swirls of lines, you've got like sharp teeth looking ones, you have arcs, you have fatter or thicker lines and such. The only theme that I'm doing, which you should really think about, is direction. So mine are kind of facing down or towards the front. Also, I'm not shy about going over different sections and also going around corners. Because the biggest thing about camo on a tank, yes, it is meant to hide the tank, but it's also meant to distort and misshape and make it hard to actually know what is tank, what is its surroundings, what kind of tank it is, and also, which way is it facing. So it's kind of meant to really mess with the eye for when it does get spotted. You're like, that's definitely a tank. Unfortunately, I don't know what tank that is. So you don't know where to aim. You don't know where the weak spots are, and so on and so forth. So that's what really camo is meant for. My point is don't be afraid to venture out with some of your lines. Don't think, this is the front of the tank, this is the side, I really should make. No, wrap it around a bit. Because even at this size, when you set these tanks out in a field or, on your table in terrain, you will notice those slight little details and you'll almost not be able to recognize your own tank or what it is. And it's really interesting, how the human eye can recognize shapes and colors and how those colors can distort those shapes. We're going to keep going, getting each and every detail, even the light right here, adding little blobs to where there might be gaps that I want to fill in. The other thing that you want to do is avoid similarities or mirroring. Whatever you do to one side, you don't have to replicate on the other. You can make it different on each little section, different patterns, different blobs, different lines. So just because it doesn't look the same on one side, don't try to replicate it on the other just because it came out good and you want to keep the rhythm going. It's camo. It's meant to look in a different way or shape. You still can follow the same direction, the same scope, or the same, patterns and stuff, but don't mirror them. Don't try to copy them. Another note I'm going to make down here, this is just fun stuff that I'm doing along the bottom. This isn't meant to be seen, or it doesn't have to be seen, but I just want to mention how I'm carrying those stripes over. So when you do paint and you do a little bit on the front, wrap it down and underneath, or wrap it around, because it's going to carry that shape downwards. And rather than your eye seeing a corner, it's literally going to see that wrap around and it's going to mess with your eyes. It's actually rather neat how it works. Going back over some of the ones I already did, if they're too faded, I didn't like the shape of them, I'll go over them again. Again, don't blob your paint just because it didn't have a good coat the first time. It doesn't mean you have to blob it on a second time. Really keep thinning and keep even strokes. That way it doesn't look like it's just globbed on, and it's actually nice and smooth. And you will get a nice clean line eventually. This is another part that normally doesn't happen, but I decided to paint the bottom part of the tracks yellow, only because most of the tank that I was looking at online, or usually I'll get a photo of a tank and replicate that pattern. So the bottom of it was this yellow. Most of the tires and wheels or rims were painted yellow as well. So I decided to stay with that theme. It's going to change eventually. I'm going to add to it that the original picture online doesn't have. I just wanted to show you what you possibly can do down underneath once we get there. And now we start with the third color. This is a brown. What I was using was a mixture of the World of Tanks wood with kind of a burnt umber model air paint, again, because I wanted a different color brown. I wanted the right consistency. And this was the brown that I came to. And we're just going to keep going with this. You want to continue the lines with the brown in the same way that you did the yellow, but you want, again, your own unique lines and curves. And you're trying to basically separate the paints or the colors, but you're also not. Depending on what type of tank that you want, you will paint tanks either a 2-color, so it's a base coat with some lines like the yellow right there, or sometimes you can go 3 colors, which even hid your tank even more depending on where you kept it or where you hid it. Another thing I see is people keeping things even or consistent, and they say, oh, I have 3 stripes of yellow on this side, I need 3 brown stripes on this side. You don't need to stick with even numbers. Again, you're not trying to make yourself feel comfortable when you look at a camo tank. You really want to look at a camo tank and be like, oh wow, that is very difficult to see. So I'm now going to carry over into the bottom of the tank, into the tread areas, just extending or continuing where I might see some brown. And again, that's the point of camo. So I draw a line and I just continue down to the next step or spot. Same goes for underneath the tank as well. So now I'm going to go back over again with the yellow, only because I want to exaggerate or extend some of the areas that I've already painted. And I want the yellow to take over most of the areas. And I want to create more patterns rather than just the lines and dashes. I want to clear up some of the lines as well to make it to where they're smoother and more crisp. Because you almost want to exaggerate some of these lines and circles, because almost the more that you exaggerate, the more it's going to be remaining hidden in cover. And just doing the other side as well. Adding more curves, adding more lines, and just smoothing out some of those edges. Now, this is where I have the most fun, is cleaning up areas and going back in with the original color. You always want to remember what your original color was, so when you want to clean up a mistake, you can easily go back and cover it up. Or if you went too far with one color, you can easily just draw back with the original color and make those lines extra crisp. I really do like the color palette that I chose. I'm even going back in, seeing crisscrossing patterns and adding more to what I originally painted, and then going back down at the bottom and re-adding the green. I could have just started with the yellow and added the brown as well, but I wanted to paint the whole bottom yellow and then go back in with the green and the brown, only because I think it makes it a little bit messier, and that area is harder to paint, so it makes it a little bit more realistic. I can keep going with this, keep making sure or recoloring certain areas, making sure the paint is painted on nicely rather than the original color showing through. But this is pretty much it. You can keep going back and forth as much as you want to get your final result. I mean, the more that you do this, the better off you're going to get, or the more skill that you're going to develop over the years. But this is pretty much the final product for what we're doing today. I am going to do more videos just on this tank because we're going to come back and show you how to paint the treads and the wheels, because you do want those to be black like the original color, because that paint's not going to stay on there. Also, again, they usually don't paint those while they're on the tank. And we're also going to come back and paint the inside where, you know, the gunner and the driver are, because I do want to paint those parts as well to show you what colors they could be, even though this is a camo tank. We'll also try to add some weathering or wear and tear to the tank, and then also paint parts of the tank that may have contained camo color or may not have. They may have remained their original color depending on when they were put on the tank, such as that front tread and the cleaner or the barrel cleaner, and even add some wear and tear on the inside, like some boot scuffing and showing some of the original tank metal, because, you know, they're always constantly moving around. Shells are dropping out that are heated, and the paint just wears and tears. Also, them opening and closing the storage for the ammo as well. So don't worry, we're going to do a lot with this tank. This isn't what it's going to look like down the road. We could even add foliage to this or a camo netting as well, and we can do a video on how to make that. But for now, this is going to be it. We really hope you enjoyed this video and that you got something from it. So thank you again for watching. Have a good one.